Welcome back to Woman, Conversations in Black and White. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Linda. We are talking together and sharing our conversations across racial lines about sensitive topics in order to learn from each other, to see each other's humanity, and we are sharing these conversations to encourage you to do the same. Today's topic is?
Today's topic is the one that you're leading, and it is on, what are we calling this one, Linda? White?
Well, I just picked some names. White
Yes.
denial, eventual recognition, and eventual remorse. So this is something that came to me partly because of my own journey, partly because I have worked over the years in 12-step groups of various sorts. And denial is a very common reaction when we don't want to admit something happened. And that can be, or we don't want to admit something is the way it is. And it can happen about a lot of things. We're going to talk about it mostly in racial terms, but sometimes to understand it helps to talk about it in other contexts too. So the mind is a powerful thing, and it can deny that things ever happened. It can just make up that they never happened because it was too hard, it was too traumatic, it was too painful. I don't know how to process it. I don't know how to feel. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to heal from it. I can't even feel the feelings that went with it. These are very normal things. And as a counselor, I mean, if you want to step in with something right there, that would be fine. We're talking about denial at the moment and how it functions.
It is a maladaptive protective factor where your brain is literally trying to protect itself from the reality of the truth of a situation because you are not either willing, ready, or equipped to sort through the situation in a way that you can gain from it. So it's a maladaptive protective factor. And it, like you said, it's not just about race. You can see it often in relationships where domestic violence is taking place, or relationships between parents and children where there was domestic violence against kids. I mean, it is a myriad of things whenever the brain is not ready or you are not willing to deal with the truth of your reality. Maladaptive protective factor.
Right. And for those of you that may be less experienced at it or familiar with the term, let's say that a child was in a situation where a person in a parental role actually sexually abused them. And sometimes the child will tell someone, and sometimes they get heard and honored and listened. But there are other times when they don't,
More often they don't.
Yes. And when the parent says that didn't really happen, just mind your own business, whatever. And that actually multiplies the trauma.
Yes.
But also the child has nothing but childish, immature ways to deal with it. And so maybe it goes on for a while, maybe it was a one-time thing, but eventually it's not uncommon for that child to have forgotten that it actually happened. It's like, there's nothing I can do about it. Nobody cares. It probably didn't really happen. But somehow within the child, it still happened. The body still has trauma response. There's a lot of different impacts. Even though denial is happening in the brain, that didn't really happen. It's not really true. The reality is there, and in the body, it's always there. It did not go away just because you pretended it did, or a person pretended it did. So that's how denial works. And in the area of, I'm going to mostly speak to my own experience, and you can extrapolate from there, our listeners. But when I did not grow up with active racism, which is a blessing. My parents were pretty open, and even in our very white bread part of the country, which was central Kansas, they made an effort to invite very dark-skinned foreign students to our home for Thanksgiving vacation. And it seemed interesting and unusual, but I saw it as a good thing. So we didn't grow up with active racism, but nevertheless, we also didn't grow up with much understanding about how racism works or systemic racism. And it was like the last 5 years or so that I became aware of it as a system, and then began to converse with Bernadette after the murder of George Floyd to really talk in detail. And at that time, I began to read books. So my first level of denial was just, well, I didn't have anything to do with it and I don't know what to do, which is a very common white person response. The people that don't feel like they've been actively racist, and the people that don't know what to do about it. They mean well, but they don't know what to do. That's why Bernadette and I use the term well-meaning white folks. We don't know if we coined it or if it's out there or other places, but it's people who mean well, don't mean to be racist, and don't really think they are. So that was my denial. I'm not actively racist. There's nothing else I can do. And that was about it. Now that seems pretty mild. There's people in much other situations. I've heard people in our community, actually, which is a town of 60,000, I think we are, something like that, actually state there is no racism in this city. But this is a white person saying it, and Bernadette and I look at each other and think, how would you know? This is not something that white people know unless they start diving into it. It just isn't. So so that's kind of where denial starts. Eventually, my denial was not real hard. I wasn't trying to protect myself. And some people are like, I don't want to know this. I really don't want to know this. Therefore, it didn't happen. So those are a little harder cases to get through. In my case, my heart kind of broke at the murder of George Floyd, but also at the outpouring, the recognition that this was massive. I had lived through the civil rights protests, and it seemed so far away. Somehow this did not seem far away to me. This seemed real. And that's kind of when my serious journey started. And I just made up my mind to listen. I did not defend myself. I gave up the denial. I gave up the defenses and just said, I don't know, which is actually probably the least painful way through denial. So if you find yourself, listeners, if you find yourself in a state of denial, like, well, there's no racism here, or I'm not racist, just set all that aside and just read and listen and start having conversations and be open. That's the best thing, because what's happening next is that white people as a whole, a lot of us are beginning to recognize, and I've called this stage recognition. Oh gosh, there really is a problem. Oh my gosh, we weren't paying attention. Oh my gosh, people that I actually know are suffering and nobody's doing anything about it. Oh my gosh, this is embedded in the system. Oh my gosh, it's multifaceted. Oh my gosh, there's people keeping it locked in place on purpose, and others of us that aren't paying attention. So the recognition phase is kind of phenomenal. And if you need something to compare it to, think about an alcoholic who all the years says, I really don't have a problem with alcohol. I can quit anytime I want. It's not a problem. Finally, her husband leaves her, her children get taken away, and she finally has to say, oh gosh, there is a problem. And then the magnitude of it sweeps over. It's like, well, then you really see what is going on when you allow your eyes to be opened and you allow yourself to see it. And it's not comfortable. And for anybody who's starting to go through this process, this is not a comfortable process. You may or may not have the Band-Aid of saying, I wasn't personally racist. I mean, maybe that helps a little, but whether or not you were personally racist, all of those who are white and live as white people have benefited from a system that at the same time it benefits us, it disadvantages and abuses and oppresses Black people and other people of color too, depending upon the specifics. But in general, all people of color, and very specifically Black people. So to acknowledge that we're part of this system is really hard. It's a recognition. It's like saying, oh gosh, I am an alcoholic. Oh my gosh. And it's a very hard thing. I am not an alcoholic and have not had that problem, but there's been other dynamics in my life that I have had to recognize. I guess the only good thing is about it, there's something freeing about recognizing the truth. There really is. And about seeing what's there. You go into the history and you see that these systems that we are living under that are oppressive to Black people and others were very deliberately put in place. You can read the history. It's not hard to find once you start looking. It's powerful. So before I go on to the last piece, is there something you would like to say here, Bernadette?
I just want to echo on when you speak about the resistance to accepting denial, because what that it really is, and typically the stronger the resistance is because essentially what you're being asked is to question your identity. And when people are having to question their fundamental identities, that is very hard for people to do.
Right.
And so we've been raised with these things in society, whether we want it to or not, that have become a part of our identity. And the privileges that come with being white and the advantages that come with being white, when you are asked to question those things, that can be very difficult. And many people take offense to that. And so the key is, as you said, being able to surrender it and not take it personally and not feel as if you're being attacked, but to take an objective seat back and just look at it. Look at
Mhm.
look at what you have been able to benefit from and gain from just from being white. Not that you haven't struggled, not that you may not have been poor or anything else, but look at the obstacles you did not have to face simply by having white skin. And so
Mhm.
the resistance is a part of the journey because you are being questioned. You are questioning your identity. And so don't think that it is an easy process or that it should be smooth sailing, because it's not. And like Linda said, it can be painful, but it will not kill you. I can
Right.
promise you that it will not kill you.
Right. Right. And if you've done any personal growth work at all, there are pretty much always things in life. I remember one thing in particular in mind that it's like I felt that facing this trauma that had happened to me as an infant was so much that I would die from it. I mean, that's the feeling I had. But I remember I sat there and cried for probably half an hour. And at the end of the half an hour, I felt sort of emptied out, but I also, my brain was saying, oh, I didn't die from that. And there was this feeling I didn't die from crying. But in me, all those years, there was a feeling I can't feel this because I'll die from it.
Yeah.
So denial is a really powerful thing. If I was an artist and did diagrams, it would be like super powerful, like a monster that we are facing. And then the recognition is not easy. It's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to challenge the way you look at life and open doors and cause you to think about things in a different way, no matter what you've done. But yeah, it's like we can't take it personally. We are part and parcel of a system. Like as much as Stan and I want to do everything green and environmentally, we're still driving cars and we're still burning fossil fuels because that's what our house runs on. And we're doing the best we can. But it's like we are part of these systems, all of us, Black people and white people and all the other peoples of color. And if we don't have the courage, the heart to recognize the systems themselves and to challenge the way they are kept in place, it won't ever change. It'll just stay there.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of suffering caused by these systems.
And that is like, here's a real life example. I literally just had this week talking to a girlfriend whose son is going to school. And my oldest daughter will be going to, I'm speaking of college, we'll start college next year. And so she's white, her son is a white male, and he is studying cybersecurity. I'm Black, my daughter's Black, she's a woman, and she wants to study marine biology. And we were talking about student loan debt. And so I was explaining to her how more than likely we will take advantage of through our school district. You can get your general education hours through the local community college for free if you do community service, and a couple things you do in high school, you can get that done. And so I was saying how we're going to do that. Oops, sorry, because my goal is for my daughter to be able to start off her life with no student loan debt. I was not able to have that gift, but I would like mine to be able to do that. And so
Mhm.
that means you got to take a couple of different paths to do a couple of different things. And she says to me, well, I hear that, but I think, if they have some stake in it, they, take on some debt, that'll make them more responsible and give them more ownership in their education. I said, I hear you. But here's the fact of our reality. Your son is white. He is also a male, and he is going into a STEM field. Pay inequity is real. He will automatically, just by being a white male, make more money starting off than my daughter because she is Black and she is a woman. Both are going into STEM fields, but Black people make less than white people and women make less than men.
Right.
And so those are realities of the society that we live in. So we have to know where our place is in the society, whether we like it or not, whether it's fair or not, whether we want to deal with it or not. Those are the realities of our society that people don't consciously think about that impact how we get to live our lives.
Right.
Just happened. Yep, just had that this week.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Yep. And if you question those facts, you can look those up. It would not be hard to look up um, the statistics between what men and women earn and what Black and white earn and what Black women earn compared to white males. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very real thing. It makes the headlines now and then.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that's part of the system that we're talking about, only one tiny part, but a definite part of this system. So
Hmm.
the third step that I identified as I was thinking over these things is you start in denial. Oh, it's not that bad. It doesn't affect me. I didn't have anything to do with it. There's nothing I can do. These are all the faces of denial about racial inequities and racial oppression. But finally, after you go through this rather difficult recognition thing, in me and perhaps in others, there is a sense of remorse. It's like I actually care about Bernadette, and I care about the fact that I wish I could do something that would make it all equal right now, but I can't. And so no matter what our heart says and what logic says, we can't just snap our fingers and change it. And the only thing we can do is just keep moving in that direction and keep causing people to have the courage to look at their own part in it, look at the part the system plays in it. But there's likely to be remorse, and you can't let it drag you down completely and stay there. Just like any other personal shortcoming, you can't hold yourself at fault and ashamed indefinitely. You have to find a way to deal with the pain of the reality without stopping to live there completely. I guess that's the best way I could say it.
Hmm.
So the stages I was calling it was denial, recognition, and remorse. And then there can be heart and action. There can be courage and action, some sort of action, whatever is yours to do. If you're white and you see that you are part of this system that has benefited white people, um, and I'm in that place of trying to take appropriate action, trying to find appropriate, meaningful action that might actually make a difference and help somebody else to say, whoa, yeah, this is something I need to look at. Bernadette, comments on those last couple of things?
I was thinking about what you were saying, and that isn't something that only white people have to come to terms with, Black people too as well. And that became so profoundly aware to me the first time I went to the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, which is funded by the Equal Justice Initiative. Because if we look at the way that we are taught our history, the onus of slavery has just about been taught in a way that it was Black people's fault that they were enslaved. And so,
Mhm.
as Black students and as Black people, it has always been carried as if something my ancestors did wrong in order to be dealt this deck of cards that I have to live with and work
Right.
through. And it wasn't until I went to the Legacy Pavilion and really recognized and saw other white people there, recognizing that they have an onus in this from their
Mhm.
ancestors
Right.
because their ancestors made the choices. My ancestors were simply dealing with the consequences that they were doled out to, but it was white people's ancestors who made those conscious choices. And that was the first time in my life as a full grown adult that I understood that slavery was not Black people's fault. It was not
Wow.
our fault.
Hmm.
But I had to
That's
go all the way to Montgomery, Alabama to learn that.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and in some ways, even though the perspective is different, you had to question your identity and reshuffle.
Yes.
Like, oh,
Yes. Yep.
I have thought, I have no personal experience in this, but I have thought similarly that, you'll see somebody in really dire circumstances on a street corner, and we are in the habit of giving small amounts of money to help that person. But I think I used to judge more, and it's like, I don't judge anymore. It's just like, that person had the whole weight of what it's like to be Black in this culture, plus whatever else traumas he had. And I have no idea what those were. And that's where he ended up for
Mhm.
whatever reasons.
Right.
And I'm a lot less likely to judge now than before. But I think of the weight of our dominant culture giving these messages not only to white people, but also giving these messages to Black people. You're not actually quite fully human, and it's your fault.
Mhm.
And it's like, how heavy a burden is that to carry?
Tremendous.
Yeah.
Tremendous. Mhm.
And sure, there are people who make it through that, but most of us have our own childhood traumas. And you add to that the cultural weight
Mhm.
of the trauma of being treated as Black in a dominant white culture, a white supremacy culture, really.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there you have it.
Mhm.
And so the denial can work from both angles. I'm not really speaking to it from that angle, but I appreciate your comment there. That's relevant to that.
Mhm.
So okay, well, I guess if you're just beginning this journey, I would say start with reading and watching films made by Black people. What have we mentioned before? 13th and When They
How
See Us, and
mhm.
any others that
And
come to mind?
also even more, and I don't necessarily mean warming, but like High on the Hog, the cultural
Oh,
food
that's wonderful.
historian, look at things
Right.
of those natures because it has not all, I would want to say, been traumatic. There are some beautiful things that we can learn about the history, the
Right.
whole history of our country. Now, will it all be lighthearted? No, but you will have a greater sense and a greater appreciation not only of who we are, but who we can be as a
Right.
nation
Right.
of people when you learn the whole story from different vantage points.
Right. Good. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you mentioned that. High on the Hog is a
Yeah.
wonderful
Yes.
award-winning, I think it's a 4-part series.
It is.
Just extraordinary. It's got food in it all the time. He talks about
Yes.
yum, and I think we should somehow have some of that food while we're watching it. But
Yes.
anyway,
Yes.
it's a remarkable journey. High on the Hog. I think it's available
Mhm.
on Netflix, is where I
It's
saw
on
it.
Netflix. Yes, all
Yeah.
all of those that we mentioned are on Netflix. Amend is on Netflix as well. That's another 4-part series one. So there are some wonderful things that you literally don't have to leave your couch, and
Right.
that you can learn and begin to have these conversations and make these connections with other human
Right.
beings as other human beings. Yeah.
And don't lose heart. If you find
Yes.
yourself in denial, it's a
Mhm.
very normal place to be, and your mind
Absolutely.
protected you and the culture didn't want you to see it, and so there
Yes.
you are. It's not that easy. It's like wading through the forest, but it can be done, and the rewards are well, my husband and I work a lot in biology, and the more diversity there is in a garden, the more diversity there is in our guts, the more
Mhm.
diversity there is in our soil, the healthier everything is.
Yes.
So the more diversity in our culture, the healthier and more beautiful and more extraordinary it can be. So
Mhm.
we wish you well on your journey through denial, recognition, and remorse, and finally courage.
Yes.
Courage and
Yes.
action. So,
Yes.
all right. Thank you, Bernadette.
Thank you. Thank you for such an honest conversation. And thank you to our viewers for watching. As we always say, start talking, keep talking, and we'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.